Good afternoon from a snowy and slushy Boston, and welcome to the Massachusetts Advantage. With 300 pre-registered, I'm very excited to kick off today's community-wide event and discussion. 5 years ago, under the auspices of the Boston Private Industry Council, PIC, I partnered with a few leading employers to create TechHire Boston. It's simply a platform that hosts several forums during the year, convening education leaders, talent programs, employers, and city and state officials to elevate awareness, share ideas, and collaborate and drive change. We also feed a very active news stream on our LinkedIn page, and I recommend that you follow us. For Massachusetts, the last 5-6 years has witnessed an unprecedented growth in non-traditional talent pipelines focused on tech and diversity. Well over 10 new programs and organizations are developing talent through boot camps, certification curriculums, and apprenticeships. Today, you'll hear from well-known names like Year Up, founded right here in Boston in 2000, and now with 35 campuses nationally, truly a program at scale, to new entries in the market like Apprenti and Perscolis, who came to Massachusetts from well-established models in other cities and states. And finally, our homegrown programs like Resilient Coders, Code Squad, and Cyber Warrior Academy. Adding Bay Path University and Ben Franklin Institute of Technology, 8 programs will be showcased today. As you listen and navigate today's program, ask yourself, how do we continue to drive a vibrant and dynamic tech economy in Massachusetts? How can our workforces better represent the demographics of the communities in which we live and work? How do we recruit tech talent beyond traditional pipelines like college degree programs? And lastly, how do we achieve greater diversity in tech, more important than ever? The format today will be very interactive with presentations intermixed with video clips and breakout sessions that you'll be more intimate to kind of do interaction and dialogue with one another. Lastly, I need to do a shout out to the Boston PIC team under the leadership of Neil Sullivan. Both bruce.stephen and Ashley Hazelton McCafferty are the official producers of today's virtual program. We've been planning this event since November and know they are both geared up that it's finally here. So to kick off today's event, I'm excited and honored to introduce Osborne Jackson, a senior economist with the New England Public Policy Center at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, who will ground us in a macroeconomic context. And knowing Jackson, of course, it'll be by the numbers. So welcome, Jackson.
Great. Thank you very much, Jim. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody here for this wonderful event. And let me start just by giving a little bit of a brief background on the Federal Reserve System and my role within the system before providing some context for today's proceedings. So, as you may already be aware, the Federal Reserve System is made up of the Board of Governors and 12 regional Fed banks, including the Boston Fed. And so the research departments in each of those institutions help to support responsibilities of the Fed, including but not limited to monetary policy. And so within the Boston Fed's department sits the New England Public Policy Center. And our mission, which I'm a part of, is to promote better public policy in New England through research and analysis of relevant economic and policy issues. And this spans a number of topics, including, as of late, the impact of COVID-19, the opioid epidemic, and affordable housing, just to name a few areas. So let me start by showing all of you some information regarding schooling and the education market, as this can affect the knowledge and skills of workers that are supplied in the labor market. And so this is using household survey information from a representative US sample in the current population survey. And I should note that the CPS microdata that are used here and in a couple of other charts that I'll show you haven't been seasonally adjusted. So I'll examine the same point in time across years in order to mitigate some of those seasonal effects. Another sort of definitional point, Boston here reflects the Boston, Cambridge, Newton metropolitan area within Massachusetts. And this will be the definition of Boston for the remainder of the presentation. There's a small sample with this area, which is a small caveat, but no pun intended. And so let me start by saying that unlike the nation, school attendance rates rose during the pandemic for college-age youth in New England and Massachusetts, although not Boston. And so we can see that attendance rates fell in all areas for high school age youth and also for adults 25 to 54 years old. And so, these changes in rates over time may reflect a combination of what one might call push factors, like the extent of labor market opportunities in the areas, as well as pull factors, like the extent of educational opportunities in those areas. Also, we can continue on with using the CPS microdata to examine labor supply by different subgroups, focusing on labor force participation rates. And the labor force participation rate is defined as the number of people in the labor force, employed or unemployed, as a share of the civilian non-institutional population. And so civilian being not in the military, non-institutional being, for instance, not incarcerated, and this is limited to individuals that are ages 16 and older, since compulsory schooling laws will make those that are younger generally ineligible for work. And so what we can see here is that in nearly all of the subgroups examined, the December 2019 labor force participation rate is elevated compared to December 2020. Um, we can see that the rate notably declined, however, for ages 16 to 24 from 58% to 49%, and this is driven in part by the increased full-time school attendance that I just discussed. Now, exceptions to those participation rate declines are slight increases for Black non-Hispanics, a 1 percentage point rise, those that have less than a high school diploma, which is a 3 percentage point increase, and those with a bachelor's degree or more, which is, again, a small 1 percentage point increase. I should also note, which is not shown in the figure, that for young individuals 16 to 24 years old, labor force participation increased more dramatically for those that had a BA or more by about 8 percentage points from 89% to 97%. And for that subgroup of younger individuals, even for those that have some college but without a BA. Now we can change now to non-farm, looking at non-farm payroll employment from a representative sample of US businesses. And this is indexed to pre-recession peaks. So after the Great Recession and potentially varying by area, and values above 1 indicate that employment has returned to its pre-recession level, and values below indicate that it has not. And currently these data are through December 2020. And so what we can see here is that non-agricultural employment in Massachusetts suffered a sizable decline in the spring when it fell in April to about 19% below its pre-recession peak. Boston, New England had similar but slightly smaller declines of 18% below peak, and the decline was less severe nationally at 15% below peak. Since then, payroll employment has rebounded in all cases. So as of this past December, employment in Massachusetts was about 9% below peak. And this is higher than Boston, which is now 10% of its peak, but below New England, which is about 9.5% below peak. And in all cases, trailing the US, which is closer to its pre-recession peak at 6% below. Boston's relative position here, is further highlighted by just examining New England and Massachusetts, excluding Boston. And in both cases, we can see that the rebound growth exceeded the area analog that also includes Boston. And lastly, we can see that in all areas, growth has been a bit more sluggish in jobs, but still, an upward trend toward peak. Now, in this table, we can look at jobs growth again, but now focusing on the pandemic. And so the table shows pairs of columns that reflect employment growth, both in levels and percentages during the 3 periods of the pandemic, initial months, subsequent months, and then overall. So what we can see, again, in the first couple of columns is that there have been these large decreases in jobs growth that occurred during the initial months of the pandemic, as I mentioned before. Meanwhile, the last couple of columns highlight what I mentioned earlier as well regarding where jobs growth stands now when looking at the overall pandemic period from February through December. But the middle part of the table focuses on the rebound period alone, which is new compared to the last figure. And it highlights that there's been slower jobs recovery in Boston compared to New England or Massachusetts, excluding Boston. Now, this sluggish jobs growth in Boston may be due to differences in the pandemic severity, as well as possibly differences in policy and public responses. Continuing on to examine jobs growth, we can look now over the past year across different industries of the economy. And so employment related to information technology may be located across more than one of the industries shown, so it's helpful for us to assess all of them just as a start. So expectedly, for all industries in Massachusetts and Boston, there's been an employment decline relative to last year. Massachusetts industries that experienced the largest declines are, expectedly leisure and hospitality, which was suffered a 39% fall year over year, and a 47% fall in Boston specifically. Other services also suffered a large decline in employment at 19% year over year in Massachusetts, and construction as well. Now, these other services include things like dry cleaning and laundry, personal care like hair care, et cetera. Massachusetts industries that had the smallest declines include finance, which was a 0.4% decline in employment, professional and business services, which was a 1.7% decline. I'll get back to that in a bit, and manufacturing. And lastly, regarding notable disparities with the US, the information industry in Massachusetts suffered relatively less employment decline, while leisure hospitality, other services, and construction, already mentioned, all suffered relatively more employment decline in Massachusetts. Now, for a bit further focus on information technology employment trends, it's helpful to focus on professional and business services and look at more narrow industry groupings. And so the figure here is looking at just that. And professional and business services is comprised of professional, scientific, and technical services, management of companies and enterprises, as well as administrative and support and waste management and remediation services. And so, and focus more narrowly on professional, scientific, and technical services, and then industry subcategories within that grouping. So what we can see here is that Massachusetts employment in professional, scientific, and technical services grew slightly at 0.2% and 0.1% in Boston. But there was notable growth in scientific R&D services at 5% in Massachusetts and Boston, and also in management, scientific, and technical consulting services, which grew at 1% in Massachusetts and 5% in Boston. However, there's been jobs decline in computer system design and related services of 4% in Massachusetts and a decline of 3% in Boston. Now, returning back to the CPS microdata, of those that are employed, an increasing phenomenon now in the past few months of the pandemic, the past year of the pandemic, has been working from home. And so this is one of those pandemic-specific questions that's been available in the survey as of May 2020. And we can look at the monthly average from May through November 2020, as December data are not available yet. I should also note that these data have not been, the microdata have not been seasonally adjusted, so seasonality might play a small role in these trends. But what we can see is that about 38% of employed Massachusetts workers are working from home due to COVID-19, compared to a higher share in Boston at 42% and lower shares in New England and the US. Now, it's difficult to examine this over time since it's been examined infrequently in the past. And when it was focused on the ability to work from home rather than whether or not the prevalence of people working from home. That being said, an earlier work of mine, separate work, looking at the labor market effects of the pandemic, I estimated that about 27% of US workers were able to work from home based on 2018 occupation data. And so that might suggest that the current working from home prevalence is at or near capacity, as might be expected given the public health concerns. Now, changing to unemployment, we can continue to look at household survey information from the CPS and further examine the labor market. And so the figure here shows in February that unemployment was at 3.5% or lower in all examined areas, and as low as 2.8% in Massachusetts. Now, peak unemployment from March to November was not only higher in Massachusetts at nearly 18%, but also occurred later in June of last year rather than in April in the US, or in roughly April, May in New England as a whole. And those peak rates have at times been underestimates due to measurement error and people being counted as out of the labor force. And so that's worth keeping in mind as well. But what we can see is that in December, relative to peak unemployment, rates have fallen in all examined areas. In Massachusetts, they're just above 7%, 7.4%, and remains above the US and New England. But the disparity is smaller compared to what we were seeing at the peak. Now, despite this decline, December rates still remain about 2 to 3 times higher than what we were seeing in February. And we can continue to use the CPS to examine unemployment rates, but now returning to the microdata to break down those rates by groups of interest, demographically and by education. So what we can see here is that in all Massachusetts subgroups, December 2020 unemployment is elevated compared to what we saw 1 year prior. And in December 2020, unemployment rates were highest for young workers who were ages 16 to 24 at about 16%, and workers with less than a high school diploma at 17%, absent any seasonal adjustment. Now, in contrast, in December 2020, we saw that unemployment rate was the lowest for workers with a BA degree or more, just shy of 4%. And one consistent pattern that we see both in December 2019 and in 2020 is that unemployment rates are generally lower with higher levels of educational attainment. We can further examine unemployment rates, but now seeing how they vary across areas of Massachusetts. Just a small note that I'm using November data here because the December 2020 data are, at the county level are not available until tomorrow. So I just want to briefly highlight that unemployment rates vary across Massachusetts counties and have increased differentially across areas. So for instance, in November 2019, unemployment was highest in Dukes County at 3.9%, but by November 2020, it was highest in Hampden County at 7.5%. Of interest regarding inclusion of Boston, Suffolk County unemployment grew from 2.1% in November 2019 to 6.8% in November 2020. But one thing I should note is that all these patterns regarding unemployment rates are also potentially, at least partially, driven by changes in labor force participation as well, especially some of the declines that we saw earlier as some people have been exiting the labor force. So just to conclude, labor market trends suggest that the ongoing rebound of the economy in Massachusetts continues, but that recovery has been sluggish given continued challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we saw that there are differences in the labor market recovery across firms, for instance, by industry, across people, for instance, by education, and also across areas, looking by county. We saw that there's positive employment growth for some professional, scientific, and technical services, and an increase in labor force participation for those with a BA degree or more. Uncertainty, unfortunately, still lies ahead, and the future path of the recovery will depend in part on the public health situation and on economic policy actions. So I want to thank you all very much, and I hope that everyone enjoys the rest of today's event.
Good afternoon. I head IT at Altiview, a biotech startup providing cancer researchers with insight into treatment efficacy with digital pathology assays. In my spare time, I'm also the 2021 president of SIM Boston, and I'm very excited to be part of this event. SIM Boston continues to be committed to diversity and inclusion in the technology community, including supporting development of alternative talent sources through our outreach programs. The next part of our program will showcase 8 technical training and educational organizations in 1-minute videos. These provide a quick intro to help you decide what breakout sessions to attend later in the day. At the breakouts, you'll be able to meet program representatives, employer partners, and alumni. These pitches will be presented in 2 rounds, with the first round including Apprenti, Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, Code Squad, and Cyber Warrior.
Apprenti is a registered apprenticeship program. We take individuals that have different backgrounds and help them move into careers in technology. When we talk about an apprenticeship program, it's comprised of two phases, one being the related instruction or classroom training, and then they move into a year-long on-the-job training experience with one of our local hiring partners.
Especially in IT, the field is expanding so much and so rapidly. We really recognize there's a need to be creative about where we find talent, and we really wanted to make sure we looked at all sources to find some really sharp people who might otherwise not have joined us.
Here in Massachusetts, apprentices working with employers to fill in-demand roles like IT business analysts, software developers, cybersecurity analysts, and more. So how can we help build your tech talent? What are your 2021 hiring needs? Let's have a conversation today.
My name is Aisha Francis, and I'm the CEO of Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, the only two-year technical college in Eastern Massachusetts. Our mission is to educate students in advanced technologies and trades that align with the needs of high-demand industries, such as those that TechHire has convened. As a minority-serving institution, 71% of our student body is Black, Latinx, or Asian. We make a vital difference in the lives of Greater Boston youth by training workers for entry and mid-level technology careers for which talent is in short supply. The college closes the opportunity gap by preparing talented students who are often first-generation college students, immigrants, or alternative learners for gainful technical employment in growth industries. Building beneficial relationships with businesses plays a key role in BFIT's ability to support a hands-on education for our students. I would love to talk with you about ways that you can partner with Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology. Thank you.
I really think that Code Squad makes a huge impact in the city of Boston because of what they have to offer.
Code Squad is a nonprofit, full-stack web development bootcamp training talented adults from Greater Boston to become full-stack web developers and launch a new career. We train students in interface design, server-side development, database, Git, and Agile methodology, and work with them to find technology roles, and in particular, software development roles in Greater Boston's booming tech economy.
Our graduates are 94% people of color and 59% women, offering an opportunity for software employers to diversify their workforces with talented entry-level developers.
I have been able and privileged to see graduates graduate from Code Squad and transform their careers from cleaning houses to starting businesses within their families.
Empowered by their Code Squad training, our graduates have found software jobs at companies all over Greater Boston, with many seeing dramatic increases over their pre-bootcamp incomes.
We are the cybersecurity experts at Cyber Warrior, a cybersecurity services, training, and workforce development provider. Our consultants protect diverse establishments such as universities, healthcare facilities, and financial institutions. Cyber Warrior Academy is on a mission to create diversity within the cybersecurity industry. We built a training and apprenticeship program based on the NICE framework at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We provide hands-on skills and certifications to people that are hungry for success and eager to join your company as a member of your team. With our apprenticeship program, you are able to evaluate a candidate's skills and fit without a long-term commitment. You get someone able to contribute while they are learning. You provide an investment in the community that attracts customers now and high-quality staff in the future. You are granted premier access to the cohort as well as to our highly valued alumni network. And you could be eligible for state funding. It's a win-win. Go to cyberwarrior.com now to learn more.
Okay, now let's bring in a panel hosted by Mass TLC President Tom Hopcroft to learn how two employers are successfully working with alternate talent sources.
All right, so as I was saying, thank you, Jackie, and I'm Tom Hopcroft, President and CEO of Mass TLC, and learning how to use the mute button. Anyway, tech is really fueled by talent. And the number one reason that companies choose to come here is because of the great talent we have in our ecosystem. The number one constraint, however, to their growth is their inability to hire enough people. So tech is a largely white and male sector. So bringing more diverse talent into tech helps address both this lack of skilled worker and also helps improve the composition of the sector, which we know leads to better performance. So today, we're really fortunate to be able to talk about alternate talent sources. And I'm thrilled that we have a couple folks with us who have their fingers on the pulse of hiring from alternate sources. We have Alessandra Lapointe, who's head of campus and programmatic recruiting at Wayfair, and Jean Suzuki, who is the CIO over at EverQuote. So Alessandra, let's start with you. Can you tell Thanks. Can you tell us a little bit about, first, just for context, what you do at Wayfair, but also, why the company has made such a commitment to DEI and alternate talent sources, and maybe even a few examples of some of the organizations that you work with?
Yes, definitely. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alessandra Lapointe, and I lead campus and programmatic hiring for Wayfair. In that role, I oversee all of the university hiring that we do for entry level as well as mid-level management at Wayfair. And additionally, the programmatic aspect of my role is really to oversee our DEI partnerships and our ability to hire from alternate pipelines, one of which is obviously the tech pipeline. So my team, I have a great team of recruiters that oversees bringing in a whole host of individuals into Wayfair every year into where across the business our greatest needs are from a headcount perspective. So we work with a whole host of organizations that you all are speaking to today and everyone is going to hear from on today's call. The part I would really highlight is we at Wayfair, part of our values and people principles, one of the people principles that we focus on is really building the best team. So we really think in order to build the best team, campus hires are one piece of that, but also hiring from different partnerships helps us to build the best team because we really value the different perspectives and different backgrounds these programs bring to the table.
Fantastic. Jean, I wanted to ask you sort of the same question. Can you tell us a little bit about your role at EverQuote, and also tell us about your reasons for working with alternate talent sources and who you might be working with as well?
Great, thanks, Tom, and thank you for having me. So my name is Jean Suzuki. I'm the CIO at EverQuote. My role at EverQuote is that I'm in charge of IT as well as security operations and IT compliance for the company. I've been with the company for about 9 years. The reason why we work with alternative talent sources, frankly, is just that I think you hit the nail on the head. We all need qualified staff. It's actually a limiter to our growth, and really, if alternative talent sources can provide qualified candidates, why wouldn't we include them in our hiring funnels? These organizations are out there, and at EverQuote, we've worked with Perscolis, we've worked with Resilient Coders, we've worked with Launch Academy. We've been working with alternative talent sources for years, from our perspective, it's not just are we going to have are we going to focus on specific organizations? We will focus on certain organizations, but in the end, it's just about getting the talent into the organization so that the company can grow. So I think alternative talent sources are sort of, it's not a, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that situation. It's just in addition to the existing funnels that we have to talent.
It's great. I think it's so important that employers be looking broadly like you are, not just at sort of the traditional sources of talent, but really trying to get out there and figure out, where can we get more folks from. So Jean, if I can continue with you, wanted to see if you could share some of the lessons that you've learned and maybe some of the best practices, both in selecting the talent sources, but also in shaping a successful relationship, with those organizations.
Sure. So I'll take the first part, which was, how do we work? How do we work and figure out how do we select people from these alternative talent sources? So honestly, we don't pick and choose, and we don't give any special treatment necessarily to the candidates that are coming from alternative talent sources. They definitely do stand on their own. I think that's really important because you don't really want to have multiple levels of of merit in an organization. But at the same time, there are definitely opportunities for mentorship or for advocacy for these for these candidates that are coming maybe potentially from alternative backgrounds that maybe need a little bit of a push. They may be totally technically competent, but from a career perspective, we want to help them out. And so we definitely are we work really hard to make sure that we have a group of folks that they can associate with. Certainly at EverQuote, we have a number of employee resource groups. We have a group called EverBlack, which represents the Black communities. We also have EverNation, which I'm a sponsor of at EverQuote, which is around multi-country, multicultural diversity. We have a women's technical group, which also advocates for women at EverQuote as well. So we have created advocacy groups that can help support the staff that comes in through, potentially from alternative backgrounds.
That's great. Alessandro, how about you? What best practices have you developed over at Wayfair? What's worked like really well, and maybe even if there are any lessons that you've learned from situations that didn't go as expected. Just curious, what your experience is.
Yes, definitely. I think one of the major best practices I would focus on is working closely with the partners to make sure you're designing the right interview process for bringing in these individuals into the organization. We at Wayfair have a certified interviewer program, which is something we rolled out a couple years ago. And a component of that is unconscious bias training, but you often have to take it even a step further than that to really prep the interviewers on the slate of individuals that they might be seeing and really work with them on, what are the questions that we should be asking this population based on the training they maybe already have had. So for instance, with Apprenti, we focus on really a behavioral interview format because we're actually interviewing those individuals ahead of their technical training. So we have to coach managers on really assessing for the behavioral aspect and really their fit at Wayfair, their fit on the team, and really we can trust that Apprenti will train them on the technical piece. And by the time they get to Wayfair, they'll really have that technical aptitude under their belt to come in. I think some other, real best practices, and we've learned this as we've gone along, is really setting them up for success when they do get here. So having an onboarding program specifically for technical individuals that are coming from the various programs. Once we work to hire them, we obviously want to focus on making sure they're engaged and supported once they get here. So similar to what Jean said, we have some very active employee resource groups here as well. So we offer and encourage involvement in those as soon as individuals get to Wayfair. And we also encourage connections of alumni of those programs that have stayed at Wayfair. So the whole reason we engage with these programs is to hopefully convert to full-time opportunities at our company. So we have a ton of individuals that are alumni sprinkled throughout the organization. So we really try to give new individuals an opportunity to be mentored and connect with the alumni of those programs at Wayfair.
That's great. Can you say a little bit more about how these strategies fit within the overall strategies, Wayfair's overall talent strategy? Are they sort of, how does that all work?
Yes, definitely. So Wayfair is obviously hiring at a very robust scale. So we have really incorporated hiring from these partnerships into our entire headcount plan and headcount strategy. So from an employer perspective, it has really been about preemptively getting out ahead of these partnerships and when the individuals will be coming to Wayfair. So we work with our engineering leadership teams, our business leadership teams to make them aware this is when the apprentices will be coming, and then they know that this is part of the program. This is when the year up students will be coming, and you need to plan for 5 individuals to be joining your team. So it's really become part of our full headcount strategy, and a very important part of it, because this is our opportunity to really have individuals from underrepresented backgrounds join Wayfair in a robust way.
That's great. And Jean, what about you? How about over at EverQuote? How does your work with alternate sources fit into your overall strategy?
So we have, like, my IT team as an example. We had a really great success with one of Perscolus's candidates actually on the IT team. I guess my feeling is that if there are people like this particular person that are coming out of Perscolus and other groups, like we need a lot more people. We need to grab people from wherever we can. And honestly, like for me, it's actually more than that. Like I launched my career when somebody gave me a chance to do some IT work for a local company when I was really young, and that kicked me off. Somebody took a chance on me, and and this year I was honored when Portskolis asked me to join their Boston advisory board, because I basically felt like I could pay it forward. And so it's not just that we have a formal plan for how we're going to take people from alternative talent sources. It's just that these are good pools of talent. Like, we would be silly not to use them.
Yeah. So I know we're running a little bit short on time, but we have a couple minutes still. So curious, just maybe as a wrap up here, and so if there are any other last thoughts you have, throw them into the answers to this question. Wondering if you have any advice for either potential candidates who might be trying to select what kind of program they want to work with, or employers who are trying to figure out how, or I should say employers who are trying to figure out how should I think about alternate sources. So Gene, I'm still with you. So why don't you answer it first, and then we'll go to Alessandra, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. So in terms of the way that candidates can probably work best with us that are coming from alternative talent sources, I'd say that first of all, we want to make sure that you're successful. And so part of success is not just from the technical side, but it may be also from making sure that your emotional needs, that your psychological needs, like all the things that make you a human, that the whole package are okay. Are you going to be okay if somebody gives you some critical feedback? And the preparation that organizations can do to be able to get candidates to the place where they can interview well, they can handle critical discussions, conversations. Those are the things that are going to make it make somebody sort of go over the top beyond just whether or not they have the technical background to do something.
Yeah, let me just jump in also with there's an audience question here about what does fit and culture fit mean to you at your respective companies, and if you use those terms, how you feel about them, whether they seem exclusionary at times. So Gene, if you want to tag that onto your answer, and then we'll jump over to Alessandra and wrap it all up.
Sure.
Cultural fit, yeah.
Yeah. So in cultural fit, I mean, it's a term that's, I think, quite loaded at this point. In these types of discussions, I'd say that we are looking really based on merit. We know that we're going to have people that are coming from different backgrounds that are not necessarily going to look like everybody else in the organization. But what we also find is that having that diversity of different backgrounds, of different opinions, different viewpoints does enrich EverQuote, and we really we're looking at the whole picture again. It's emotional stability. Are you going to be able to do your job? Are you technically capable of doing it? And this is going to be a good place for that candidate, not just from an employee perspective, also from a employer, and also from the delivery of the services that need to be done to our customers.
That's great. Yeah. And by the way, thank you to the audience member who sent that in, because it's a great question for a sector that's so white and male to say, well, what does fit mean in here? So Alessandra, over to you, just on advice for potential candidates for employers, and how do you think about fit and cultural fit? Any of those, or any other last remarks we have?
Yes, definitely happy to comment on those things. So I would say to individuals interested in going through one of these training programs in terms of what org to pick, really it comes down to what excites you from a career path perspective. I think the really exciting thing about working with one of these organizations is it's a real opportunity to pivot your career. So if you are heading down one area of subject matter expertise, this is really an opportunity to pivot into something that may interest you more, or you might be more excited about. I would also encourage you to look at where the grads of the programs have gone to date. So, what other employers have the grads gone to? And if you're excited by that slate of employers, that's probably a really good indicator for you. I think in terms of being an employer that partners with these organizations, we have really embraced them here at Wayfair, but it is really about getting leadership to be really excited about these partnerships. So we assign an executive champion to each of our partnerships. So there are both grassroots efforts as well as more formal ways we are talking about these partnerships. I'll share a brief anecdote. I've actually had a couple hiring managers say they really are preferring candidates from some of these partnerships because they come with such a great deal of real world experience and such a great deal of experience from perhaps their former career that they can bring to the table really here at Wayfair. And then in terms of answering the cultural fit question or what we're looking for, in terms of the Wayfair culture, we are really investing in and have been for quite some time in the DEI space. We've always cared about building an inclusive workplace and really valuing and showcasing all the different voices and perspectives that can come to the table. We obviously have a very diverse customer base as well, so we find it very important to have as diversely represented of an employer base as well. So that is why it's really near and dear to Wayfair and has become such an important part of our headcount strategy each year.
Well, thank you so much, Alessandra and Jean. I think we crammed a lot into a short amount of time here, and I thought this was a great session. So I want to keep things on schedule, so I'm going to hand it back over to Jackie, who can tee up the video pitches. So thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. And thanks to Alessandra and Jean. It's really great to hear their perspective as employers, leveraging these different talent pipelines and supporting those employees once they're on board.
Hi, I'm Beverly Benson, Program Director for IT and Security at the American Women's College at Bay Path University. We offer a 100% online degree program in cybersecurity. Our students are provided with a solid foundation in cybersecurity, and then depending upon their career goals and aspirations, they can then major in 3 areas: risk management, digital forensics and incident response, and information assurance. Please stop by and learn how we are equipping women from all diverse backgrounds in the skills, the competencies needed to thrive in the field of cybersecurity.
My name is Plinio Ayala, and I am President and CEO of a national IT workforce development organization called Perscolis. In Boston alone, we will train close to 1,000 people over the next 4 years because cities like Boston are going to need help to bring their economies back.
And I'm Robin Nadeau, Founding Managing Director of Perscolis Greater Boston. We at Perscolis advance economic equity through rigorous training for tech careers and connect skilled talent to leading businesses. We partner with you to build diverse and inclusive tech teams because we know that diversity of thought and experiences creates more valuable teams and ultimately a better ROI. In Greater Boston this year, we're leading entry and mid-level career training geared towards the needs of the overall regional labor market and our customized corporate partners. Come join me, our partner Tech Systems, and one of our grads in the breakout to hear more about what we're up to and how we can work together.
When I think about resilient coders, I think of it as this dream maker for me.
So I would definitely recommend hiring a resilient coder. They don't want to give up.
Your company isn't for equity until you hire for equity. So any companies out there, come check it out.
I would recommend that others look at resilient coders, but hopefully Wistia gets to them first.
We are diverse, we are driven, we are complex. We're well-rounded. Because we don't have that traditional tech background, we were forced to kind of figure things out, to be agile thinkers, to really just take everything that we have and make it work for us. And when we work for your company, that's what we'll bring for you.
What really makes America great? What makes America great is that we pair our powers with something intangible. The only nation in human history organized around a handful of civic ideals of equality, of opportunity, and fair play. They're interdependent. that is what makes this country unique and special. And in neighborhoods all over this country, there are people with just as much creativity, just as much imagination, just as much ambition, who haven't had their chance at the American dream. And keeping faith with that dream is what draws a lot of us to Year Up.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is well and enjoyed the event today. My name is Kathy Counts, and I am the CIO at Eversource Energy, and I'm also the chair of Boston CIO. Boston CIO strongly supports and promotes the need for diversity in tech and utilizing alternate talent sources to recruit into technology roles in our organizations. At Eversource, we've brought in apprentices who have, after completing their apprenticeship, successfully moved into full-time business analyst roles in our organization. These employees have worked out so well for us last year that we've decided to bring in more apprentices this year to work on one of our large projects. Tapping into these alternate talent sources has now become a part of our recruiting and staffing strategy going forward. Today, hopefully you heard why tapping into this talent pool can bolster your tech hiring in a dynamic market and help advance both your business and your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. You can tap new diverse pools of quality talent through the broad set of programs represented here today to source for entry tech positions across a range of high growth roles like general IT support, cloud, cybersecurity, web development, and software engineering. I would like to thank our event sponsors, Boston CIO, Boston PIC, City of Boston, Mass TLC, Mass Hire, Metro North Workforce Board, Sim Boston, and SkillWorks. And I would also like to thank the participating tech training and education programs, Apprenti, Bay Path University, Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, Code Squad, Cyber Warrior Academy, Perscolas, Resilient Coders, and Year Up. And finally, I would like to thank the employers that supported the training and education organizations at today's event. Abacus Insights, Athena Health, Boston Children's Hospital, Cengage, EverQuote, Harbor Health Services, Homesite Insurance, Liberty Mutual, Stewart Healthcare, Tech Systems, and Wayfair. As you leave the event today, I would like to encourage you to consider the following. Choose at least one of the programs represented here to follow up with after the event. There are opportunities to donate your time, expertise, and funding. But most importantly, consider them a source of high quality, diverse talent to integrate into your tech hiring plans. And please feel free to connect with TechHire Boston to help shape future meetings and events like this one to advance the diversity of the tech workforce in Massachusetts.